Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was... Nobody expects the TORC Inquisition.
Hey everyone, welcome to what we're going to fondly call the TORC Inquisition, because every so often, Dan and Michael and I, we get tired of each other, and and we need to inject new blood. We need to expand our circle a little bit, and so we want to talk to more interesting people than us. Not Michael, you're okay, but Dan,
it's not hard to find more interesting people than us.
So today we have the privilege of talking with John Trent, who is, and correct me anywhere I'm wrong, John, because I don't know you outside of really this discussion that we've had, which is kind of fun because this is totally brand new for everyone, including me. But you're the editor-in-chief of boundingintocomics.com.
Correct. Yep.
For the last 8 years, you've done it, I think. Is that what I saw?
2023. Yeah, I think around there, 2015, 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
It's about right.
And also now Bounding Into Sports.
Yeah, we started that in June.
That's crazy.
Last year.
That's a lot of writing, man. That's a lot of writing.
Yeah, the sports one, I'm not writing as much. I'm more of like the kind of the editor, the guy who finds all the stories. I still spend most of my time on the entertainment site for the most part. But...
Cool. Well, so the site. So really, what we want to talk most about is Bounding Into Comics, because obviously, I mean, I'm a huge Steelers fan and I would love to talk NFL football, but the season's over. There's nothing much interesting to do. So, but what we do want to talk about is Bounding Into Comics, which is, geek culture, right? Is that maybe the best phrase to use?
Yeah, pop culture website, sure.
Yeah. But the difference is about Bounding Into Comics, which is great. It's not from the usual Hollywood perspective, right? You're not CBR.com or Deadline or any of these others, which have a certain perspective that many in maybe middle America like me don't really hold to, or anybody who thinks a little bit deeper on things don't hold to. And that, I mean, I don't know what that comes from. I think there's probably some of your faith involved with that, maybe some of where you grew up. And so maybe what you can do to get started is kind of tell us a little bit about Bounding Into Comics, how you got it started, where it came from, and then we can jump into maybe some Tolkien talk too and talk about our favorite show, The Rings of Power.
Yes. So I started Bounding Into Comics, I think around 2015. I was working for a company called Generation Opportunity. It was if you know anything about like Republican politics, it was like a Coke Industries company. I was very young, opened my eyes to a lot of the stuff that was going on.
Coke, like the Koch brothers, COCH,
yeah, the Coke,
right?
Yeah. And
KOCH,
so I had a lot of I had a lot of free time on my hands, and basically they weren't really letting me do any work. So I started the website, and I was able to, and it was basically just me reviewing comics for the first time and kind of getting into comics. And so if you go back, like we still have a lot of those old reviews up on there, and you can see all my old reviews of comics, and that's all I was really doing for the most part. And then I started kind of reaching out to the publishers, and we started doing like news and stuff, and it was just mainly just publishing press releases on when new stuff was coming out. And then I don't know, probably around 2016, started writing opinion pieces, and I was contributing to another site called Adventures in Poor Taste, which is now called AIPT as well. So and I was mainly just they were just republishing my reviews basically.
Okay.
that I'd written. And then but yeah, I was doing some more opinion pieces, kind of criticizing what I was seeing and just kind of like what was going on within the comic book industry. And then at that time I had kind of switched jobs as well. So I was doing I had moved on from Generation Opportunity, and I was basically in publishing. I was working for the company I work for now called Intermarkets. And around 2018, they approached me to purchase the website, and so they were going to let me run it, be in charge of it, run it full time. And I decided to sell, and been running full time since 2018. And that's pretty much when we really kind of started expanding what we were doing, was really able to like kind of enact the vision I wanted for it. Because up until then, I was trying to like, it was really tough. I was working a full-time job and then trying to come home after like an hour commute, and then trying to do the other site, and it just wasn't working, and I wasn't spending time enough with my wife and everything. So fortunately I was able to sell it, and they purchased it, and had our best year last year, and we cover a gamut of pop culture topics. I'm probably a little bit rough on the timeline there. I probably need to get that down pat. I think that's pretty much how it goes. It might be a little bit off on the timeline though.
So why did you why did you start it though? What was the impetus behind you wanting to start the site?
Yeah, I just wanted
beyond just and maybe let me rephrase that a little bit. Beyond just the comic book reviews, but it's become more. I mean, I hate to just use conservative because it's not right. It's from a real life perspective. It's not from the fake confines of Hollywood and the sheen that they put on everything. You're like, this is how real people see the kind of stuff that they put out and real reviews. So how did you get into that sort of that perspective on the site? And
so
was that part of the original goal for it?
So I didn't like have a real goal. I mean, like when I first started, it was just I'm going to review comics and that's what I'm going to do. And eventually, though, like how I viewed the site evolved. I wanted to grow it. I wanted to have more to build the traffic. I wanted to kind of build a community. I saw a lot of stuff that I kind of found offensive, distasteful within what was going on with the comic book industry. So I started covering it from my personal opinion point of view. At that point, I was very still kind of libertarian in my mindset. I was not practicing Christian. Which I am now. I'm practicing Roman Catholic, and so that's kind of where I was looking at things a lot. I was looking at it from that perspective and kind of criticizing a lot of the stuff that I was seeing from that kind of perspective, and kind of grew from there.
Wow, and I love hearing that you're now like you've had your best year last year because it shows that people want that perspective. People want to see more than just what they're being fed from the golden lights of the West Coast.
Yeah, I think it also, I mean, to be quite honest, I think it helps us that we're probably like the most predominant in that space. We don't really have a lot of competiters.
Do you have any competitors? Not. You don't have to promote them here. It's okay.
Chris Braley at Bleeding Fool is a competitor.
Okay.
As far as when it comes to print, obviously there's tons of competition on YouTube, but I found that YouTube viewers are a lot different than people who read. Just from my personal experience, I'm more of a reader than a person who's going to sit and watch a YouTube video. Although that's kind of changing a little bit. I do sit and watch like homilies and stuff now, but I'm usually not watching like stuff that I'm covering during my day job.
Yeah.
Bishop Barron, by any chance?
I watch some Bishop Barron. I really like Father Chris Alar up from Divine Mercy up in I think he's in Massachusetts. I really like his stuff.
Nice. I'm enjoying Father Mike as well.
Yeah, my wife and I, we're way behind, but we're trying to do the catechism in a day. I think we're like 30 days behind. Yeah, catechism year. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're like 30 days behind though.
Even I have listened to Father Mike, guys.
Yeah, Father Mike's great.
Was it the Bible in a year? His podcast,
I don't know. I quit after one episode. I couldn't do it. It's been a little while, but last year, I found him and listened to a couple episodes.
You would have to give up your Reformed Church card if you listen to it too much.
Well, so let's lean into that a little bit because Tolkien was a Catholic, right? And you guys are that. But I want to talk a little bit about, and obviously, right, I've been deep into Tolkien for decades now at this point. And so I come from a different perspective. Michael's crazy because he makes his children write to him in Elvish, in Quenya, when they have, right? Isn't that what he said? Or Tengwar?
They don't have to write Quenya. They just have to use the script, which is Tengwar.
They have to use the script, Tengwar script. Okay. So you, on the other hand, right, you cover like the Rings of Power, right? You cover from the perspective that essentially we do, which is like, what a disaster that was.
Yes.
It wasn't, and nowhere near what Tolkien wrote, nowhere near what Tolkien intended, throwing modern day representation and ideas into a story that's supposed to be from when Tolkien wrote it and times before. However, so tell me, how did you get interested in Tolkien? Like, what's your story with reading and obviously viewing? Like Dan in our podcast, he saw The Lord of the Rings before he actually read any of it.
So I actually read The Hobbit. It was assigned reading for fourth grade in my Catholic school. I read The Hobbit. I really enjoyed it. I read a ton when I was a child. I don't read as much now.
Except for all those news articles.
Yeah, I read a ton of news articles. But yeah, so I read The Hobbit at fourth grade for assigned reading. Really enjoyed it. Tore through it. And then I was like, okay, let me read the Silmarillion next because I want to start, like, let's go to the beginning, right? So I'm thinking that it's going to be written similar to to The Hobbit. No.
Wow.
And
Like
I
going
pretty
from
much
Dr.
crashed,
Seuss to Chesterton or something.
I pretty much crashed out, and I never made it to the Lord of the Rings, the actual novels. I have them here, and I obviously I look through them and cite them for the articles that I write about them, and so I actually do the research that the people at Rings of Power clearly didn't do, or if they did, they decided to completely ignore it.
He was too problematic.
But I watched the movies when they came out with Jackson, saw them all in theaters, love them. I actually appreciate them more now than I think when I saw them when they came out. I have the extended editions on Blu-ray, fantastic films. I do think you're right in your criticisms for them, especially with the scouring of the Shire. That should definitely be included in Peter Jackson's film. I think that's a huge error that he made to not include that. And I honestly think that if he included the Tom Bombadil stuff, that could have been fun too. Because I have read a number. I haven't I went to the chapters and read it out of not how I'm supposed to read it, as the narrative go. I just went to it and read that section, and it's fun, whimsicalness, and I think that's missing a little bit from Tolkien's. Or from Jackson's films.
Right. And which here, I'll just say real fast, which also, if you do include Tom Bombadil in that, you don't get Aragorn giving Merry and Pippin their swords and being like, here you go, here's some swords, which he does in the films, where they actually get it from being essentially imprisoned into this grave area they call the Barrow Downs. And so it would have been nice.
Yeah, it would have been nice. I actually see Jackson's wisdom in keeping Bombadil out. Bombadil, I agree with you, John. He is whimsical. It's almost like a totally different. It's like the older form of fairy tales, more like young child 19th century fairy tales. But when you're making a movie, the kind of the vibe would be all off if you had to switch back to it's being chased by the Nazgul and stuff like that. It would be kind of odd. So maybe they could pull it off, but it would have been difficult.
There is a rumor he's going to be in the Rings of Power as a character.
Yep.
If they, I don't know, Tom Bombadil will be hard to do, but to have somebody who couldn't even do the good stuff and the best part of Tolkien, I just don't know how they would actually pull that off. It's so sad. So anyway, so let's move then into. So you saw the films, you enjoyed the films. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Got us a lot of clicks though, didn't it, Jonathan?
That's the large silver lining. Although I still wish they'd never been made. It would have been far better. Which brings us though to where we are now, which is we've all seen the Rings of Power. I think we probably all have the same perspective on it, is that even if you take out today's sensibilities that they're trying to put into the show, it's just so badly written, right? Rocks look down, ships look up.
It's just poor writing,
Yeah, the whole point of Galadriel about to go into I'm blank on the name.
Valinor.
Valinor, thank you. I can never remember that.
Okay.
I want to say she's going into the Valor, but I'm not. No, those are the people. She's about to go into Valinor, and then they make it look like there's some kind of evil there, and then she jumps off and rejects it, and I'm just this is awful. And that from that point in the show, I was like, there's no way that they possibly can understand anything about Tolkien's theme, the work, anything that he wrote, and this show is completely dead after that.
It was really, I think the most bothersome element to me was their misunderstanding of the themes of light. So for Tolkien, yes, the theme of light is so strong throughout his works as the thing that is high and above the darkness. I mean, you even have it on your shirt from Faramir quote. Fantastic quote, by the way. Yeah. My favorite character in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, I got it from Voyage. Voyage Comics had it, and I had to get it.
That's awesome.
It's a great quote, and many great quotes from Faramir. But it's just the whole idea, the whole imagery of Galadriel going towards this light, and the light becomes creepy. They make it creepy, and there's you said, John, there's something wrong with it. And at that point, that was just another nail in the coffin for me, which was an early coffin, apparently, because it's only the second episode, or maybe the first one.
I think it was the first one.
I mean,
it's the end of the first.
It's funny, you keep thinking, did you see every episode, John? Did you go through every single
I watched all of them,
yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
The tone of voice.
Nobody says, I watched all of them, they're so good. No, nobody ever. I mean,
I watched them so I could properly critique them.
Right, yeah, you have to.
That's us.
And we kept thinking, well, this show just, it can't get that much worse. And then they had the hobbits leaving their wounded on the roadside. And you're like, how did they keep, who's thinking about these things?
that's even more galling because like right before they leave them, they're like, we're all about
I know.
taking care of our family.
What's
and
their
it's like,
stupid chant?
clearly not.
No one walks off trail and no one goes alone. No one goes alone. No one walks off trail or something like that. I guess if you walk off trail, then it's like you're falling off the edge of a cliff, right? There's the trail means you're out of our good graces.
In our podcast, we even had to invent a new acronym for them. We called them the dirty little sociopaths. Because
pretty much.
Yeah, they were.
And it's just like the light, the theme with the light. It's the opposite of Tolkien's theme. You know, hobbits represent all this goodness and sort of a simplicity and humility and innocence, and the power that innocence has in the face of evil. And these guys are the opposite. They're
just the way they're depicted. They're dirty.
Yeah,
they're dirty. They abandon each other, and then they make up stories about how cute, how funny it was to abandon the other. I mean, like.
As much as Jackson like kind of had like his issues with the Hobbit, that opening scene where you get Bilbo in his home, like that shows how much he cares about cleanliness and like being neat. And he's just like, these dwarves are coming in and like ruining everything and dirtying it up.
And this goes to like even, I mean, it's a little Chestertonian or anti-Chestertonian to say, you know, being ancient means you're dirty or being ancient means you're dumb, right? That this is not like that. Being ancient simply means you were different and not as advanced in technology, but it doesn't mean that you gave up cleanliness, you gave up thoughtfulness, right? And so I don't. Do you remember what essay that was, Michael? I know it was in when we read it in the group together. But in any case, where he talks about,
I don't.
Anyway, this is Chesterton. But that goes to the writers, right? How they don't understand anything, and that makes me scared a little bit about what's coming up with the Warner Brothers, because we just learned, last week that they got the rights to the movies, to the theaters, everything except TV, essentially. For the Lord.
And we have a question for you at the end about that, but that is fascinating to me, which is, will they learn from the backlash against Amazon? Will they learn from the poor writing? Is there someone somewhere inside of Warner Brothers to be like, maybe we should go a different direction and go more Jacksonian on the treatment of the remakes of the stories?
Well, they did say that they're going to bring in Peter Jackson, or they're actually in communication with him.
Yeah, they're in communication. They
sent like Jackson's team with Fran and the other person sent out Philippa,
Boyens, I think was
yeah, they sent out a statement that they're like in communication. They're looking to see what their vision is going to be. My opinion is as much as Zaslav is like cutting costs and doing good business sense, his creative choices do not inspire. I mean, he has James Gunn at the head of DC. Yeah. Everything he's kind of said about DC is just, I'm not interested in it. I'm not sure how much DC fans are interested in it as well. I mean, this is also the company that was when they launched. I mean, this was pre-Zaslav, but I would assume the creatives are still there. This is the company that launched their HBO Max streaming service with a pro-abortion film. So I don't really have high hopes for any kind of creative people inside Hollywood, especially if they're going to tap J.J. Abrams' acolytes, which they're still working with him on a number of projects outside of in DC, and I think outside of DC as well. That's my opinion. Maybe they'll surprise me.
Silence is just such disappointment, right?
If you stay, I mean, the source material is there. We know it's great. We know it's good. We know this stuff can be adapted properly. Jackson does prove that, but but we also know that it can be adapted absolutely horrendously. Rings of Power is proof of that as well.
And the one thing, I almost never say anything nice about Rings of Power, but the one thing I will say about that is there is an interesting angle on the Rings of Power series, which it doesn't excuse the just abysmal writing, pure and simple, but from a Tolkien perspective, they were in a little bit of a bind in one sense, because if they utilized Silmarillion, my understanding from a legal perspective is if they couldn't legally utilize the stuff that's just in the Silmarillion wasn't in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings. And so if you made a world and showed a world which was too much like the Silmarillion, you're opening yourself up for legal action. And so I still think that they could have done it that in a way that was consistent. And when they went down the whole train wreck of course, the woke stuff and the Mithril rewriting what Mithril and elves' longevities, it was so stupid at that point.
Yeah.
That it's hopeless. But There
Well, they
is
told
a
us they were going to do that, right? Write the novel that Tolkien never did.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. It's like the midi-chlorian moment of the show when they introduced Mithril and the lightning and the Balrog and the elf and oh my gosh,
it was bad.
The midi-chlorian stuff. When you actually get Lucas to talk about it, it makes sense.
Really?
He doesn't explain it very well through the film though, with what Qui-Gon does.
Right.
But he does kind of like break it down, and it does kind of make sense when he actually explains it in interviews.
And do you think it makes sense in the sense? See, one of the problems that I had, and I was never really, I loved the original Star Wars trilogy, but I was never a Star Wars nerd. And so when I saw the episode 1, I thought to myself, this doesn't jive with the way the Force is being. What we're doing is we're coming up with a materialist way of explaining the Force versus a spiritual way, which is what the Force had been in the first 3 movies. And so for me, that was where the disconnect was.
Yeah, I get that. I also, with the way Lucas, and I think that's how a lot of people took that from episode 1. Like I said, he doesn't, I don't think that episode 1 explains that very well. When Lucas talks about it in interviews, he talks about the midi-chlorians being almost like this conduit where the Force uses the midi-chlorians to like communicate. So you still have that like spiritual nature, but he's trying to connect it to this like physical entity within like your blood or whatever as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of like,
which also kind of contradicts what he talks about with the Force, where you can like train it and grow stronger. So it's like, if it's actually like a material thing, though, can you really grow stronger? Like, unless you're taking it from someone else, which looks like what they're trying to do in The Mandalorian.
I think, well, this is now going back. This is going back to 99. But I think he just got too specific with midichlorians. If he would have left it a little bit more wide open about like don't give us a count to say, we see him high in midichlorians, this could mean that he's a great, and leave it a little bit more of a question rather than a definitive scientific empirical answer. But that's whatever. Yeah. Anyway, Warner Brothers. So I learned today, I saw today that there's news that Warner Brothers, based on their contract, is not allowed to do anything similar to what the Amazon Rings of Power show is doing.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
I saw one of the couple of the different Tolkien Lord of the Rings Twitter accounts posted that as news. Can't remember who. Maybe I can find it. However, but if that's true or not, right? Here's the thing: they would be kind of dumb to do that right now because one, they're setting themselves up right away to compare to that. But maybe that bar is so low that maybe that's what they should do.
Right.
But here's the thing. You never got through the Silmarillion. If you do ever, John,
I've read a bunch of it though.
Okay, there's the audio book by that's read by Martin Shaw. Michael has some problems with the pronunciation, which is correct, but it's done really well. It's done really well. That's how I got through, because like you, I couldn't read it. I couldn't read through it either. I tried when I was in high school. I was
trying to do it as a elementary school kid.
Which Michael's kid did, but he makes them write in Tengwar. So
no, I did not force my child. I did not force my children to read any of them.
I didn't say you forced her, but we know that the sway that you have over your children, Michael, and how you think. No, I'm joking.
It is the requirement if they want screen time. So they do have to explain to me that they're done and what they've done this afternoon in Tengwar in order to get screen time.
Yeah.
But I do have a daughter who's a total. She's read the Silmarillion 6 times already, and she's 15 years old.
More than me.
So she's a complete nerd. And
I think once you get past the first stage stuff, it reads pretty well. But that was my issue. I had trouble getting past a lot of the creation origins.
Well, stuff. And it's just a different kind of literature, right? So The Hobbit is a fairy tale, and the first part, the Ainulindalë, is basically it's the mythology. You're just being given
it's the creation story,
right? It's creation, and it's the gods with a small g of Middle Earth, the Valar and the Maiar, and you're telling it about the beginning of the world, and that's just a different kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny. I
readily admit that.
Yeah, no, you're not. Here's
creator.
the thing: is you're not alone. A lot of people will be like, "Ooh, I'll read through the Silmarillion now." After reading Lord of the Rings, they get to, they're like, "What in the? This is not what I was expecting." All right, and that happened to me because my dad was like, "Here, read the Silmarillion now," and I was like, I read through, like you. I probably got through like 2 or 3 chapters, and I'm like, I don't really care. I don't know who is this, and I'm not connected to any of these characters. But like you, once you get, like you said, I think once you get through that sort of that hump of the middle, like you push through to the end. And even Dan, our co-host, who had never read who could not be here today because California hours. Blame Gavin Newsom. He couldn't. It was hard to get through that first half, but once he got through the middle part and when he got through the stories, he was like, guys, I finished reading the book. Sorry. So we can't. So he's already read it, even though we're doing the podcast. Right. It was going to be like him reading through it first, but he's like, it just got too interesting. All the people, all the characters that I know now. Yep. So anyway.
The Fall of Numenor story is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I really like it. I really enjoy it. And to see what they're doing with the Rings of Power is
so wrong.
Very sad.
Okay, and this goes to like my issue with Rings of Power is it's too big. They tried to do too much. There's so many good small stories they could have done, and they just
I don't understand why they tried to do the whole time suppression. They should have just done the one season, one like small story.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Move to the next one. Move to the next one. I don't know why they tried to like time compress all of this stuff and then mishmash it all together. I just think that was a terrible decision, and whoever came up with it should be fired.
And there was a recent article. Was it from CBR? Who was it from, Jonathan? We reviewed on the podcast where they were arguing that the Rings of Power's decisions were correct about the adaptation because Tolkien's problematic. All the ways Tolkien was problematic in terms of adapting him to the screen, and they actually addressed the time compression. And they said their argument was literally, it would be really difficult not to do time compression because then you'd have one season, a bunch of human actors and with the elf actors. And then the next season, which might be hundreds of years later, the human actors would be dead as you just have the elf actors and new human actors. And
that's not hard to explain though. You just,
exactly. I just looked at the article and I went, so people understand. I mean,
Peter Jackson did exposition at the beginning of the
Exactly. And there's the reality that, interestingly enough, if you're shooting back-to-back seasons, elves don't age. So it's actually a benefit, unlike other shows where you have seasons that sometimes stretch out so long the characters visually age between movies or between seasons. And in this case, you would have this situation where the elves would all be looking the same, which is correct, and then the humans would be different, or some of the humans would be
and shows don't really have a problem with that because look at Game of Thrones, they did it within their season as well, and granted it's the same characters, but it's completely different actresses.
Better Call Saul does a prequel, it's just like all kinds of shows that do that. It's not a problem
House
at all.
of the Dragon just did it. They had they aged them up after like 20-year time gap or whatever.
Yeah. And there were a couple of actors and actresses. They switched the actresses out for the time jump of the years because they were young at first, which is fine. Like, and people, not only did they get over it, but it turns out that House of the Dragon was well written. At least I thought it was better written than Rings of Power. And so it was a big success.
Well, let me ask a kind of a bigger question then, and this goes into about writing in Hollywood and just writing in general. And eventually we're going to get into our extended podcast where I think we're going to talk about extended podcast for our patrons, $4 a month. First month is free. Go to theonering.com/patron, song and dance. But anyway, we're going to talk there about like maybe what should the next Warner Brothers movie be? What should they make, knowing what they have? Talk about some of that.
We know what the next one is.
Are you talking about the Rohirrim?
Yeah, War of the Rohirrim is the next one.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
what do you think of that
movie?
I know. I'm giving you a hard time. I think that is a fantastic story.
Yes.
As soon as they announced it, I literally went and read it. And it's
Helm
an awesome story. Man. And it plays it's like Tolkien was doing shonen before the Japanese came up with it. Before it was like introduced to America, because Helm Hammerhand is literally like a shonen warrior. So the fact that they're doing it as an anime, I think, is really cool, or anime inspired, I think plays really well. Especially like I can't wait to see like this haggard like dad full of grief and sorrow just going out blowing his hammer and instilling fear in the Dunledins. I'm probably saying their name wrong. And just going in and just one man wrecking crew, like destroying them in the middle of like a deep winter.
It's going to be exactly what the Rings of Power should have been, which is a smaller story with characters we care about.
Exactly.
And it's not to say that it's you have like Helm Hammerhand, but you can also do the stuff where you have what's his name, the son of the guy that he kills, going into the palace of Rohan, taking that over, and then after the snow melts, you have
it takes Edoras.
Then you have the snow melts, and you have the army coming down from the north, and then obviously it should end with Saruman going into his tower at Isengard as well. So So it's not like you just have this like small story. There's other things happening, but like hopefully it stays focused on Helm as well. And then I think you should get this like kind of like epilogue at the end of like, so like, I don't know, it's full of like battles and war and stuff. So it should play really well if they stick to the source material.
Right. Because I like what you said there, John, where that's the beauty of Tolkien, right? You can actually tell a great story with just a small piece of what he wrote, and then make sure you have those connective tissue that goes out to the stuff that we know about, people appreciate, like Sauron occupying Orthanc at the end of that story, and the fact that Helm Hammerhand, I just read to my youngest sons the Battle of Helm's Deep, and so they got the 2 or 3 line version of Tolkien, writing about Helm Hammerhand from the mouth of the Rohirrim, and it was so awesome to me, because I'm just reminded over and over again, the more I read the books, how this is where the Tolkien's great attraction for everyone comes from. I mean, he's attractive, obviously, to people like us, but he was plenty attractive to people that aren't, that have no connection with him as a man of faith, with him as his world draws everyone in, because it has this tremendously rich history, which you only get tiny hints of in The Lord of the Rings. You don't even get, you don't get the story of Beren and Luthien except as a few verses sung by Aragorn to the hobbits on the road. You get so little, but that little bit tells the reader this is a real place in a mythical sense. So, but
CBR has told us that random characters show up for a short amount of time in The Lord of the Rings, Michael, and it's a problem.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, this is from the article that we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Who are they taking issue with?
They're taking issue with that small characters show up, and people don't like it when small characters show up and don't do anything, like Glorfindel or like Arwen was small in Lord of the Rings. Like, they're saying essentially like all these tidbits of old historical characters nobody likes that in modern audiences. So it's an odd take that
I think that plays to the fact that it helps us suspend our disbelief, makes us actually live in that world. Because that happens in our world too, right? It's not like all the big players doing everything. If you said you do medieval history, there's how many people know all of the players in like the Crusades or anything like that? And you have you do have small players that did play key roles, and then they went off and didn't do anything else after that. So that's
right. Yeah, there are plenty of those, and that's what happens in real history. That's what's so interesting. The criticism that Jonathan just referenced is the criticism of a person who lives soaked in an entertainment culture like ours, where everything is TikTok, the video in front of your face, and we're supposed to care. But this is actually why George R.R. Martin, one of the reasons he was so successful with Game of Thrones in the first place, was because he was mimicking late medieval storytelling, the War of the Roses. And he had so many characters that would come in and out, and some of them were just. That's what's hilarious to me is when I hear a criticism like that, I'm thinking, but that's exactly what these even non-Tolkien authors do that brings tremendous success. Is if you fill out the world with a tremendous number of characters, as long as you can make them believable, and the story isn't crap, then it can work real well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw that even in Ender's Game. I don't know if you guys have ever read that. That was the
absolutely,
yeah.
Orson Scott Card's best one of the
and he wrote a bunch out of them because he had all these great tertiary characters that he thought, well, you know what, I know a little bit about them. Let's expand their story, and they get their own book, and you learn more about them. But they were only interesting because they were small characters with interesting storylines to begin with.
The Book of the Fallen of the Malazan Empire series is almost like set up that way. Almost all of the books can be standalone, and they introduce new and different characters. They all have almost different protagonists, but there is like that connective tissue with the world and everything like that. And probably one of my favorite high fantasy series.
Nice.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, so we really got off on a tangent, but my question like 10 minutes ago, geez, guys, this always happens in our podcast. It was this. So I don't know if you guys, I watched the first 2 episodes of Picard that came out.
Okay.
The first 2 seasons
of
Picard were utter, absolute trash. They were the worst Star Trek ever.
That's what I've heard.
Discovery.
I watched the first one when it was on YouTube for free.
Oh yeah, right.
That's me too.
It's a good thing you didn't spend any money on it. Let me just say. But so they're poorly told. Nobody cares about the characters. Picard is a shell of himself.
Literally,
because he became an android essentially. But in season 3, I don't know what changed. Like I would love to know.
They got a new showrunner.
They got a new showrunner, but I want to know how that happened, right? Because what it does is, like, the first 2 episodes were amazing. They were so good. They were so well done. The characters made sense.
The first 2 episodes of season 3?
The first 2 episodes of season 3. Yeah,
really,
they are very well done. And I mean, you can go to the biggest critics right now, like if I, a Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic, those guys who are like clearly they make their money on I hate to say that, but they make their money calling out the crap in Hollywood, and nobody was expecting this. So how did that happen? And because here, let me set it up a little bit differently, because now I think you have so many bad writers in Hollywood. Nobody knows how to write well anymore. And I was talking with my brother about this the other day, about how when we went back to episodic TV, writers were forced to write short stories. They had to have a beginning, middle, and end in 45 minutes, right? And you had to set up character. Every word was important. Every phrase was important. Every interaction had to mean something. And now you have writers that have 8, 10, 14 episodes to create a story that is one story, which probably could have been told in a 2-episode arc, and Next Generation.
Is like super drawn out.
It's so boring because they don't know how to write well anymore, and so that's my concern moving forward. With
I think it's a twofold issue too, because I think a lot of times, I mean, James Gunn even said this. For as much as I criticize James Gunn, he made this comment when he announced his Chapter 1 plan for the DCU. He basically says that there are studios out there, they don't even have their scripts finished when they're going into production, so they're just doing it on the fly and trying to put it together while they're shooting.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
That happened with The Hobbit.
I don't understand. What kind of business is
You know
this?
what it is? It's because well, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you might be thinking the same here, but I think it has a lot to do with they got a studio deadline. Investors want it out at a certain point, and studios have made a promise. They need to get that money back, and whether or not it's actually up to the quality that they expected, be damned. And and they just got to go out and do it.
And so a specific example of that we were all familiar with because of The Hobbit that Peter Jackson made. Guillermo del Toro was originally slated to direct The Hobbit, and he spent a year, 2 years in pre-production on it. He decided not to do it anymore because it was going to take too much of his time, I think, something like that, and he wanted to do other things that were his own rather than Tolkien stories. So they brought Peter Jackson back. Jackson said, I'm going to need another year for pre-production, and they said, you don't have it. So they had to start filming before the script was finished, before all the pre-production was finished. There's some video. If I can find it, I'll splice it right here. Of Peter Jackson looking like alone on a set, kind of like looking down with like a paper in his hand, trying to figure out what they were going to do next, because he just didn't know. Like they were still trying to figure it all out. And so that's why there's so much extra stuff. They decided to add some other storylines that didn't really work because it wasn't set up originally in any reasonable fashion that the studios would let them do it. He wanted a whole other year of pre-production, and they said, nope, sorry, you can't do it.
Well, that actually explains a lot.
Yeah.
Disney Star Wars is probably another example. I mean, Rian Johnson said they didn't have a script for his film, and he just got to do what he wanted to do after what Abrams came out with.
Abrams never has any idea where anything is going to end, because all that matters is his mystery, right? The mystery box. All that matters is like, we don't know what it is, and neither does he.
And you saw that in the third one where it's like the dagger, right? You got to go.
That was like what's the word? Like everything's a MacGuffin in that movie. It's like the dagger has to go to the thing, and then we got to get the thing at the place with the thing. And like in C-3PO, he's not allowed to speak in the dark side language. I'm like, anyway, and so me being a Star Wars fan, I waited in line 240 hours to see The Phantom Menace in 1999 on the streets of Hollywood Boulevard. Like at Grauman's Chinese Theater. So
see that that's dedication
over the course of a month. And that's one of the ways I got the OneRing.com started, actually, was being there and meeting some folks in line. But yeah, so like I love Star Wars, and then I saw The Phantom Menace, and I was like, oh, I feel like I have to love this movie now more than I actually did.
I mean, there's some good things from The Phantom Menace. I like the pod racing because I like racing, so I love the pod racing stuff, and that was fun.
Yeah,
but some of the other stuff was a little.
George Lucas just needed somebody there to say, it's not George, let's try it this way instead.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a better film.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Way more than, I thought the prequels were bad, or the prequels needed help until I saw the sequels, which complete disaster, utter complete stuff.
I actually think Lucas was like heavily inspired by Tolkien, especially in like Return of the Jedi. You have like the Aragorn Boromir confession scene with Luke and Vader. I definitely think he has like there's a lot of connection between Lucas and Tolkien when it comes to that storytelling. Maybe that's they're both tapping into the same kind of like that universal storytelling aspect that I think you were kind of talking about a little bit earlier, Michael. That's why everyone is so attracted to Tolkien, because he has this universal story that he's telling.
Yeah. He knows how epic stories are made. I mean, that was his day job as well as a professor at Oxford in Anglo-Saxon literature. So he was working on this his whole life. But and it is fascinating to me that it taps into a secondary topic, which is we're running into this a lot in our culture right now, which is it's hard for people to understand how difficult civilization is to build. So when you have the art of good writing, I just asked a few minutes ago, like, how could this happen where you don't have a finished script? And then you guys did a good job answering, but then I was thinking to myself, maybe this is also part of the general corruption that's happening, because it actually takes a lot of, when you read a guy like Tolkien or a generation before him, you read a guy like Chesterton, there's so much that they're building on in terms of literary understanding, in terms of the language itself, that when you start tearing down, which is what postmodernism specializes in, is tearing everything down. Once you start tearing down, and you've done that for a few decades, maybe you're left with a bunch of writers' rooms where people can't write anymore. So when they have a deadline for a script, they don't. It's the quality's crap, and then you have to go to production with subpar stuff, and maybe this is all part of the zeitgeist of the age. I don't know.
Yeah, it's taken a long time for literature. Not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but over the last 40 years, literature studies in school has been decimated into absolute meaninglessness, where modern day messages are more important than the quality of writing over the last 2 centuries, two millennia. So it's been completely destroyed. One last question before. Oh, go ahead, Michael. I
was just going to ask John to speak a little bit about if he has any further branches, and because you branched into sports recently, and so you got pop culture and you got sports. And is there anything else on the horizon?
I have a YouTube channel that I'm trying to do. I do a show Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays at 2 p.m. called Bounding Beyond, just kind of talking about pop culture stuff. That's the Bounding into Comics YouTube channel. And then we have our Black Pill stream, where we black pill you on how terrible entertainment is today from at 9 p.m. on Wednesdays.
How do you jive the black pill of the entertainment culture with what's probably a white pill of your faith?
Yeah, so I don't actually think it's that.
Say, like, you have no qualms about putting your faith into your articles, and I love that because it's real, right?
Yeah,
talk about that.
So I started doing that when I was like reverted. I had a reversion a couple of years ago after my grandfather passed away. Went to his funeral mass, and I don't really remember what the priest said during the homily, but whatever it was, the Holy Spirit touched me, and started going back to Catholic church. I'd been going to some Protestant churches with my wife, but started going back to a Catholic mass after that, and we obviously had to get married in the church and everything, and confession, and all those steps, and this was all during COVID too.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
And we were expecting our first daughter at the time too. So we're doing all this stuff at the same time. But kind of got off track there. What I was saying, but
how your faith influences the articles and the black pill stream you have.
So I started. I mean, we used to do stuff where it was like pin-up stuff, and I don't do that anymore. Because I just felt like the Holy Spirit in my conscience was saying, like, hey, I don't want to be responsible for people lusting over images, even if they're kind of just like art and stuff, especially if it's like exaggerated stuff and it's not just trying to highlight the beauty of the art that they're making. So we really rolled back on that stuff. And then more recently, I've actually just kind of been I cite the Catechism all the time. I cite Pope John Paul II now. I cite priests because I don't see the culture war anymore. It's like kind of this right-left dynamic or woke, anti-woke. It's a supernatural battle. and we have to be able to have a voice out there fighting with it. And I don't think that there's anyone really even doing this at all, even on any kind of like political sites for the most part. Of course, there's the Christian outlets, but I don't see, like, you don't see mainstream political sites even having these kind of foundational principles where you can actually argue against a lot of the stuff that's coming out of Hollywood that they're clearly pushing as an agenda. I mean, you have this guy here, I think his name's Peter Hoare. He literally is admitting to tricking people in order to try and getting them to watch homosexual propaganda. And there's been arguments that the church has made, great man, much greater than myself, clearly laying out how a lot of this stuff is illogical, it's against the natural law, and why it should be opposed. But at the same time, we do recognize we recognize this, that all humans are made in the image of Christ. And so we want to try and bring them back to the faith that they should be. So I do try and put that in. But at the same time, I think at this point in our culture, there's like, people don't even recognize that sin exists. And so I'm of the opinion that might not be the best messenger to work with you on being as compassionate as maybe what I should be, but it's more about, hey, sin is wrong.
Yeah.
You should stop doing that. And maybe someone else might be able to be the person who's like,
right.
Be a little bit more like, here, this is how you be a little bit, work on that, I guess. I'm struggling for the word for that.
God uses everyone, man. It doesn't matter, right? We are just called to speak truth, speak love. And sometimes it feels like they're at odds, but most of the time they're not. And
we're all fathers here. Yeah, we're all fathers here. And I just had to like discipline my daughter for almost like the first time, like kind of physically. And I hated doing it and it sucked, but it was like, he had to kind of do that. And that's something that you have to do.
Right.
Tough love does exist. And,
well, if you really love them, see, that's the thing. What our culture tells us is that love is a feeling, right? And it doesn't have any argument for that. It just tells us that, and it sings lots of songs about it. But in truth, I mean, I'd rather pull from sacred tradition and people like Aquinas and say, well, look, actually love is an act. It's willing the good for another person. Yes. So if you really love someone, you will act towards their good, whether it makes them feel good or not. And as a parent, you have to correct kids. You have to discipline. Right. I mean, Scripture is very clear about that, that the Lord and parents discipline because they love. So, and that doesn't feel good. I can't stand disciplining, but I have had to do it. And because I have so many children, it happens with some frequency. But
particularly older ones, the younger ones were like, "Oh, Dad."
Well, they know that I love them, and that's the struggle. The struggle is you have to make sure that you're seasoning discipline with overt signs of love and of compassionate love, I should say.
Right.
And so there, that's a real thing. I had to chuckle. I have to admit, I'm glad Jonathan pulled up that article, because I had seen a couple of different articles about the Last of Us director admitting that he was just wanted people to watch a gay romance, with the episode, whatever, 3. Or something.
Yeah.
But I had never seen one that managed to shoehorn in the definition of the complementarity of the sexes according to Catholic social teaching, and so that was fantastic. I laughed when I saw that. I was impressed.
I actually, I don't know. This was last year. Catholic Answers actually asked me to do some stuff for them, but I just haven't been able to because I don't have the time. But,
yeah.
Well, it's a bandwidth.
Because they like my Tolkien coverage. Yeah.
Me too. That's why we're talking. All right. Well, hey, so this has gone on long enough. But only for you guys who aren't paying for anything and who don't want to support people like me and Michael and John. Which you should. One, by watching. Thank you, listening. Appreciate that. But we also, for instance, we here at thewondering.com at the TORC Inquisition, as I think we're going to call this. We do have patrons. You can go to theonering.com/patron and subscribe there. It's $4 a month. You get access to our Discord, get access to our extended podcast, which is probably the most popular part. And we do monthly chats together, usually in Discord video, until that gets too unwieldy and there are too many people, and then everyone's talking over each other, and we'll figure it out then. However, that's one thing we have, but I want to give John the chance too. Other than boundingintocomics.com, go there. I still use RSS feed, so I see every article that you write, which is awesome. But what's the best way to follow you? How can people reach you?
Yeah, so we're on Twitter at Bounding Comics, where you have our newsletter sign up on the website. It's in the right column. If you want to sign up for that, we usually send it out daily, I think. I don't know. We might have toned it back a little bit. I don't really handle the newsletter stuff. We also have, we're on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're pretty much on every social media site. We're on Facebook. We're on Gab, we're on Parler, we're on Truth, we're on, I don't even know, we're on them all for the most part. Minds, we're on Minds. Bounding into Comics, to search us, you can find us. We usually post all of our stuff on all the social sites. We're on Telegram. We've got a Discord channel too, which I think you should be able to, just message me on Twitter and I can send it to you. I'm not as active as, I'm most active on Twitter, was what I'm looking at.
You were like, don't even email me, just contact me on Twitter, man.
yeah, just send it to me on Twitter because I get so many emails. I miss a lot, so
I know the feeling.
Because my emails like combine, my personal like Bounding into Comics emails combined with like our press email, so I get all like these press lists from like everyone trying to get me to cover their film or TV show or whatever.
Of course, yeah. And so this is your Twitter right here.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, John. We appreciate it, and I hope all the rest of you join us. As we will, look at maybe a little bit more Warner Brothers stuff, see what we think, what's coming up. And we're going to do our inaugural edition of Confessions from the Comfy Chair. Because an Inquisition needs a comfy chair. If you don't know, look up Inquisition and comfy chair, and you will see what we mean. So we'll see you next.
Are you going to... Do I need a green screen so you can shop a comfy chair?
Comfy chair. I don't know. Do you have a gaming chair? Is that comfy enough, or is it just like
it's just like an office chair before we like went remote? It's comfy.
Honestly, I don't even have a chair. I'm actually at a standing desk right now. So
yeah, I could tell.
Jonathan's the most fit among us.
Oh no, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Anyway, everybody join us in the extended podcast. You can get it here, and follow John, follow Bounding into Comics. And we'll see you next time when we inquire on other people.
Bye, freeloaders.
Again, you're so mean, Michael.